You are watching One Book, One Review with Wiebke.
Hey everyone, a few days ago I talked about my adventurous cover buying habits of picking up books by the cover, maybe reading the first sentence or a paragraph, but never the synopsis, and just plunging into the books unknown. And today I'm going to show you some of them. I looked through my shelves and I found a lot more than I thought I had, and it was so much fun. There are no particular order. There are some good ones and some not so good ones. Let's start with Mr. Pibb. I love this cover. It's very colorful. And it's a very good book talking about the civil war in Bougainville and about a little island that got caught in a civil war and how the people on the island survive. Loved it. How Did You Get This Number by Sloane Crossley was an essay collection similar to David Sedaris. And I really like David Sedaris books, who I found through a cover by as well. But these were just meh collections. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't really interesting or funny. It was just meh. Look at this cover. Wouldn't you buy it? This book is so dark and extremely weird. I just fell in love with it. About this weird undertaker who has some weird habits, and then all of a sudden they're in this backwater world. Weird. Loved it. I recently mentioned Chick. I bought this for the cover because look at it. So shiny and nice. And I loved the beginning, but the ending was not so good. The Immortality Engine by George Mann was another cover buy, and it turned out to be the third in the series. But I love this cover. All the tiny details. This was a rather obscure read, mainly because I didn't know what Turing machines are, and turns out to be their computers, but I didn't know. So I read this weird story about Turing that is not biographical, but sort of made up, picked from biographical points. It was an interesting read, but not something I'd pick up any other day. My first Neil Gaiman was a cover buy, and we all know I love this book. The Infinite Wisdom of Harriet Rose is a weird book. It's sort of a teenager publishing her writing, and she gets success all of a sudden, and it's so weird. And you read her writing, and it's sort of cute and sort of like, oh my god. But it was a fun read. I picked up the first Law trilogy for its cover. The first 200 pages in the first book were really slow, but then it picked up and I loved the second book. The third one was okay. But this is a dark fantasy series and you need to read some Joe Abercrombie if you're into fantasy. I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive by Steve Earle was also a cover buy because of all the details in the cover and the title. It just sounds amazing. Turns out it's a song title by him. But the book was about some drug addict and doctor and I don't even remember. It was an okay read, but nothing special or majorly awesome. But I'm glad I read it because I wouldn't have known otherwise. Now this was a cover buy because when I read it, I hadn't heard of it before. I read it years ago and how can you not love this book? Look at the beautiful cover. Death Dancing. I kind of have a thing for skeletons on covers, so if it's a weird cover with a skeleton, I'm likely to buy it. Unfortunately, Q was not a good story. You can see the postcard. I still don't know what it's about. The Bartimaeus trilogy was a cover buy for me because it's shiny and it had a demon or something on the cover and I was like intrigued. Love the series. Read it, it's fun. No and Me was another cover buy and it was an okay book. It's talking about a teenager in France and how she befriends a homeless person and how that affects her life. It's sort of interesting. Not a majorly good book, but not a bad book either. Look at this gorgeous cover. Isn't it beautiful? And I flew through this book despite its size. I loved the story and the weird way it was written. Basically the writing is the best about this book. Now this cover had me intrigued because I thought it looked really good with like the picture and the sort of classic touch to it. Unfortunately it was about a midlife crisis of a man and who falls in love with a younger woman and it was a little bit weird. Now this cover had me intrigued. A book, Eating by a Rat, and it's about a rat reading, and I loved it. It was cute. You should read it if you're into books, because who isn't into books? Another good buy was Sea of Poppies, because, oh look, shining sea of poppies, and the ship, and the puppies, and they're on the side as well. And it is really interesting. It's about the opium wars in India, and it's just the first in a trilogy, and I need to read the second one, which doesn't have such a nice cover. The Sly Company of People Who Care is definitely a title buy. I loved it and all the things around, and it was meh. It was about this Indian guy going to, shoot, I forgot which South American country. One of the South American countries and just living there for a year and exploring the country, and it was more of a travel blog and it was okay, interesting to read about the area and about the Indian guy and his personality and his perspective. But yeah, nothing I would recommend to anyone. You see probably a pattern on what kind of covers I like. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, interesting title, the color, the bird, huge. It's like over 1,000 pages, tiny print, but so good. And I heard they're making a BBC series about this. Can't wait to see it. Another recent cover buy is The Illicit Happiness of Other People by Manu Joseph, and this is an amazing book. I love the writing, I love the story. It's about an Indian boy who died and his father trying to figure out what happened, and it's very, very interesting, and I loved it. I saw the transformation of Bartholomew Fortuno after I read The Night Circus, and I was in a circus mood, so I thought this sounds interesting, has an interesting title and freaky cover. But it was kind of weird about this guy who doesn't eat in the circus and the freak circus. The story was a little bit meh, the writing was a little bit meh. And of course we cannot talk about cover buys without me showing you The Gargoyle, because this is one of my favorite books and I only bought it for the cover. And I'm glad that I saw this edition, because the other cover with the angel's wings on the back tattooed of a woman, I would not have bought. That just didn't intrigue me. But this was like the burning heart, the saying, the little arrows, the demon, like the gargoyle, and I just love this book and the cover, it's just so perfect. There are many, many more books, and as you can see, there are really diverse reads in there, and reads that I would not have picked up otherwise, and books that I probably wouldn't have read, but I'm glad I did because I learned something out of it. And even if it was just that I don't want to read anything by that author again, but most of the books were really good, and I love doing that. Be adventurous, pick up books that look good.